everyone, it's part 4 of building my wind chimes at home from stuff I already have. That was the challenge I presented to myself a few weeks back. I've always wanted to build wind chimes, but I needed to have a restriction. I couldn't go out during these times of the virus and go buy anything, so I had to make it from everything that I have in my possession. And so far, it's working out pretty well. Today, it's basically making the support for the wind chimes and picking the right wood for that and actually cutting out the disc that will support the wind chimes. So let's get to it on this fine, sunny, warm, somewhat breezy day. Well, all right, here is the cutout template from Lee Height's website. And so now I'm going to take this template and compare it to what I have laying around. So this is kind of like a wood roll call at my house. Let's start with this. Now, this is probably not appropriate. This is just the side of an old desk we used to have. The only problem is it's particle board, and I just don't think this is going to hold up to the weather very well. It's the right thickness, I think, to support the project. Also, fasteners have trouble sometimes going into particle board like that, so probably not the best choice. This would be a really, really good choice here. This is, I believe, a piece of oak. It's thick enough, I love that, but it's, as you can see here, the template is wider than this particular piece of wood that I have, so that's going to be a problem. Here's a piece of 7/16 OSB board, which it's probably just barely on the edge of what would be considered thick enough to hold the chimes. But again, I don't like the look of it, and I was going to have my daughter actually paint a design on this, and that surface right there is just not appropriate. And then I think this is 3/8 just plywood, which is good. I could work with that again, but I think that overall the thickness of it is maybe not going to hold the weight of the chimes very well, although it's the proper width. So I'm going to have to do some more investigating or just make a choice based on what I just showed you. I don't like any of the options really, but we'll see what we can come up with. I do have this 1.5-inch treated outdoor decking. I used to have a different staircase on my deck that I tore apart and kept some of the scraps. This is probably overkill. You can see the thickness there. Wouldn't want that wind chime to come crashing down on anyone's head. But, you know, ultimately this may be what I choose to cut the template out on, and it just so happens I have a wide enough board. This is not what would typically be laying around. I just happen to have this. So I may choose this. It'd be harder to work with in terms of cutting out. But it would take to a router very nice to smooth the edges, and it would certainly hold the mounts for the wires that would actually hang the chimes pretty well. And it doesn't appear to be too cracked with age here. I could probably go into the center of that and make that work. Lee Height's website, it's a little breezy out here, so I'm holding the paper, but Lee Height's website makes it very easy. You just pick the number of chimes and the tubing diameter, and it'll tell you what the outer circle should be. And this is a cutout. It tells you where all the chimes are going to hang, the shape of the star striker, if I should choose to use that, and how it would be cut out, where all the mounting holes and the eyelets would go, and where the support for the actual top part of the chime would even go. And then for the striker, I'm thinking, although I'm not completely sold on this yet, of a keeper striker. So a keeper striker keeps the chimes within these areas right here, these pie slices, if you will. And this is a good idea for larger chimes that might get unruly in very windy conditions, and it just keeps the chimes, I should say, from just going all over the place. So I may cut this out. It's a difficult pattern to cut out, so I may lose patience on that, or may not have the right material. We'll just have to see how that goes. Otherwise, you could just use the star that's recommended for this type of chime size. All right, so there's the board I'm going to use. What I did is I took the template and cut it out, and basically we can verify that it fits on the board. And eventually I'll trace this out. But what I want to do here first of all, this board is very long, so what I will eventually do is take my circular saw and cut this off a couple of inches either side of the circle. But also, since I mentioned earlier that I wanted my daughter to paint a design on here, this surface is pretty rough, and I would like to sand it down while the board is as big as it is. It'll just be easier to clamp down and work with. And then I'll cut out the actual smaller section, and then eventually the template. So what I did, I don't know if you can see that, but I've got the 2 pencil marks, basically where I'm going to improve the quality of the wood between those two. And I'm just going to use my belt sander here and get a really rough grade sandpaper just to get the obvious cracks and weathering out of this. And then I'll use a finer grade sandpaper when I'm all done with that. All right, so there it is. I just made the wood nice and pretty there in the middle. Got the paint off of it on the other side. And now I'll basically just take my circular saw and cut that nice part out. And then I'll be able to cut the circular pattern out of that. All right, well, it's a little breezy today. I just took a small nail and put that cutout, that pattern, in the middle of this board. I basically just conditioned and shrunk down. Now I'll take a compass. Do you own a compass? It's very possible this may be the compass I actually bought as a requirement when I was in elementary school. Believe it or not, that's how long I've had it. The little piece of trivia you don't need. Anyway, so I just measure from the nail to the edge of this, and then I'll use the hole that the nail made, of course, to round out and trace out the pattern on this wood, and then I'll be ready to take it to either a jigsaw or my bandsaw, which I actually haven't checked out to see if it works yet. That'll be the next step. All right, there it is. It'll need some help on the edges there, some sanding. Probably use that belt sander again. And some splintering did occur when I was going with the grain right there. But again, that's nothing that some wood putty and some sanding can't fix. So that is the support for the actual chimes. All right, I did decide to get fancy and take a router to the edge of this support. And I just picked the appropriate blade for that. And I've never been the greatest at operating a router, and I don't have a routing table. So this should be interesting. I hope I don't mess it up too badly. Again, sandpaper can fix just about anything. All right, so I clamped it down, and I used the router. I don't have anyone to help me record this, so I can't actually show you how that worked. But just remember, when you're using a router and you're looking down on it like this, the blade's turning clockwise. So you want to go from left to right, or in other words, as I was doing this, around counterclockwise on this disc to make the blade work efficiently. All right, well, there's my finished disc with routing edges on both sides. It's still a little rough. It needs some fine sandpaper and probably a little bit of wood fill. Again, structurally, this will work just fine. So all the things I just said are just to make it look a little better. And like I mentioned earlier, if we're going to paint the surface of this with some artwork, we just want that to be as smooth and nice as possible. Well, that does it for this part. On the next part, I'll talk about the striker. I still have to decide whether I want to make the star-shaped one or the one that totally encompasses the chime itself. That's a little less unruly, I think. I don't know. One's harder to make than the other, so we'll see. And then we'll actually, I think, start supporting some chimes from the actual support. See you later.